Assalamu alaikum viewers, hope you are well. I'm here with another new topic to elaborate, and that is War of Independence. Do like my channel, subscribe it, push the bell button so you can get the notifications. Let's start it. First of all, we have to see the causes of the War of Independence. There were some causes like political causes, social causes, economic causes, and military causes. We are going to see all these causes in much detail. First of all, let's see the political causes. Local Indian leaders saw themselves in decline when British extended their control. And in 1852, Governor General Lord Dalhousie implemented the Doctrine of Lapse, by which the British got the right to confiscate the state where the ruler died without a male heir. Under this law, the state of Satara, Nagpur, and Jhansi, and many more came under the British control. Oudh had made male hire. Oudh had male hire, but it was only taken by the British, saying that the Nawab of Oudh misgoverned the state. This created resentment among the people of these states. Mughals were treated badly by the British, which created further resentment, as Mughal Empire was in decline and emperors left with little power by 1857, but were still the important symbolic figures. Bahadur Shah and his family were expelled from the Red Fort of Delhi and were shifted to Qutb Sahib. His successors would not be allowed to use the title of the king, and Muslims took it as an insult of their ruler. In 1835, English became the official language, replacing Persian, and the same year Western education system introduced. An English administrator used insulting remarks on Eastern knowledge. There were less opportunities were given to the native Indians to be a part of civil services, which also created resentment. Now, social causes were the British considered it their duty to spread their culture in a largely uncivilized world, as they thought it would be a very superior one. And they treated Indians as an inferior race and showed an arrogant attitude towards them. They never get mixed with them as social equals, and they maintained distance. The preaching of Christianity created unrest among Indians, and many thought that the government of British was supporting missionaries, which was a threat to Islam, Hinduism, and Sikhism. British always denied this forceful conversion, but were never trusted. It was true that Christian missionaries were called to convert the locals and to set up schools where they taught Christianity. Hijab was banned, which was strictly adhered among the Muslim minority groups, and sati was also banned, which was a religious practice among Hindus. Female infanticide was also banned among Hindus. The British introduced an educational system in India that emphasized Western values, which was resented by the most of the local population at that time. English became the medium of instruction, and religious education was eliminated. Indians were required to send their children to co-educational schools, a concept that was unpopular as it seemed to impose British norms without consideration for Indian religious and cultural sensitivities. Muslims in particular opposed this system because it conflicted with their practice of parda or hijab, as studying together meant boys and girls mixing together, and which was against their cultural norms. Then we have economic causes, that exploitation of the Indian wealth, because Indians were unhappy due to this exploitation of Indian wealth. British had adopted a policy of exporting cheap raw material, Indian raw material, and importing an expensive ready-made goods. Means they were taking the raw material from here, they were manufacturing the products in Europe, and they were getting them back over here in the subcontinent on higher prices. In 150 years, more than 1,000 million pounds were sent to England. Income from India was more than 10% of the British budget. Indians were never liked, they never liked this policy and called British plunderers. British merchants made substantial profits from their trading in goods such as textile, and the destruction of the textile industry in India was to safeguard textile manufacturing in England, and it also made resentment in Indians. To shield their industry in Britain, high taxes were imposed on Indian goods exported to Britain, while custom duties on British goods were reduced and eventually eliminated. This flood of cheap British Indian imported goods into Indian markets led to intense competition and the collapse of Indian industries, mainly textiles, due to the dominance of inexpensive machine-made products of Europe. Consequently, unemployment arose, and it had many challenging conditions for the Indians. British also followed the practice of imposing high taxation to exploit the wealth, and as a result, peasants, small landlords, traders, industrialists, and middle class of India was badly affected. Unlimited poverty was there in the entire society, and it made India an underdeveloped country. Now, if we talk about the military causes, in January 1857, British announced new rifle in which new type of cartridges were used. The user had to remove a strip from the cartridge using teeth in order to fire a gun. The rumor spread that the strip was covered with a fat of either pig or a cow. Since Muslims considered pig as unkosher and Hindus believed cow as sacred, it was not acceptable to both of the communities to use these cartridges. So this created resentment and unrest of the spoils in the army. The action of Mangal Pandey, a spoy from Barakpur near Calcutta, led to the mutiny of the spoils. The immediate causes of the mutiny revolved mainly around resentment felt towards changes in the sepoys' dress code introduced in November 1805, that Hindus were prohibited from wearing religious marks on their foreheads while on duty, and Muslims were required to shave their beards and trim their mustaches. The army of Vellore mutinied against British, opposing the replacement of the turban by a leather cockade. The British policy showed discrimination in the treatment between the native sepoy and the British in matters of promotion, pension, and service provisions. Sepoys and Sawars were mostly Indians, while officer class was entirely British. Rumors were there that the soldiers would forcefully converted to the Christianity as well. So these were the issues, and moreover, British were also keeping the salary of the sepoy very low, which created more resentment, and British paid a very low amount of 7 per month to an infantry sepoy and rupees 27 for a cavalry sawar, means the horse soldier, from which he had to meet the cost of maintaining uniform, food, and upkeep of the horse. The British enforced overseas services for Indian soldiers, compelling them to serve wherever the British desired, which caused disconnect among Hindus and Muslims, because Hindus feared losing their caste by leaving their land, while Muslims were reluctant to serve in Muslim countries, refusing to fight their Muslim brothers. And orders to deploy Indian soldiers to overseas war fronts such as Afghanistan were met with opposition, as Orthodox Hindus viewed overseas travel was sinful. So these were the main issues that why there was a war of independence. Now let's move towards the events of the war. There were mainly 5 events, like paper cartridges, the sacking of Meerut, Battle of Kanpur, British atrocities, and the Rani of Jhansi event. So we will see all these events in detail one by one. First of all, let's see the paper cartridge event. as I have little bit explained it before as well. So in January 1857, British announced a new rifle in which new type of cartridge was used, and the user had to remove the strip from the cartridge using teeth in order to fire a gun. So the rumor spread that the strip was covered with fat of either a pig or a cow. So Muslims considered pig as a unkosher animal, and Hindus believed cow as a very sacred animal. So it was not acceptable to both of the communities to use these cartridges, as you can see in this diagram that how they had to do that. So the action of Mangal Pandey, who was a spy of Barakpur near Calcutta, led to the mutiny of Spy. He actually refused to use that cartridge first of all, and then he was attacked his barrack, and the mutiny started, and there were British casualties as well. Then Meerut was sacked. There was a resistance to the use of infield rifle. Later that month in Meerut led to the outbreak of a revolt in May and the start of the larger resentment. Sepoys were court-martialed and put in prison, but their fellow soldiers broke the prison and freed them. So Meerut was sacked and British officers were put to death. Later, Delhi was also captured by these soldiers, and Bahadur Shah too became the reason to unify both Muslims and Hindu for uprising. Mathura, Kanpur, Jhansi, Allahabad and Lucknow were also taken from the British for some time. Battle of Kanpur. In this battle, troops joined the 1857 revolt, killing officers and any Europeans they could find, led by Nana Sahib, who harbored a personal grudge against the British for halting his pension. So despite a British force holding a defensive position for 3 weeks, they eventually surrendered after being promised safe passage. So tragically, Nana Sahib betrayed the agreement and attacked the barges carrying the British families, and resulting in the deaths of nearby all soldiers and 300 women and children, with only 4 soldiers and 100 women and children surviving as prisoners. Upon British reinforcement arrival, Nana Sahib had the prisoners killed as well, shocking the occupying forces, and in retaliation captured spoils were severely punished and hanged, but Nana Sahib evaded capture and leaving the British appalled by the events in Kanpur. Now, if we talk about the British atrocities during this war, British regained those areas again as they proved to be very powerful to be defeated by the uncoordinated uprisings. The city of Delhi became the center of the uprising, so it was the seat of Bahadur Shah Zafar, the old and largely powerless emperor of Mughals. So Delhi was occupied, and it was recaptured as a priority of the British. So Delhi was regained in September 1857. Bahadur Shah too surrendered peacefully, but his sons Mirza Mughal, Mirza Sultan and Mirza Abu Bakr was brutally murdered, and their heads were presented to him as a lesson. When trials were held, those convicted of mutiny were blown from cannons. It was a cruel punishment with religious dimension. By blowing the body to pieces, the victim lost hope of entering paradise in some of the communities. The people of northern India called the long period of reprisals the devil's wind. Thousands were hanged, and many innocent civilians were killed. Later Lucknow was regained, people were burnt alive, and Muslims suffered the worst, and the culprit Muslims were sewn in the pig skin and they were hanged. The name of actually the Rani of Jhansi was Rani Lakshmi Bai, and she was the adopted daughter of ruler of Jhansi. She was not accepted as ruler by the British. When Jhansi was captured by the British under Doctrine of Lapse, Princes and Maharajas, along with their people and soldiers, found themselves unemployed and humiliated, but she revolted. She dressed up like a man in the war against the British. She made an appeal to Tatya Topi to assist her, and Tatya Topi, who was his, courtman, he rushed to her defense with a force of 20,000 men. Finally, on 31st March, Jhansi could no longer hold, and the British managed to enter the fort. She was killed by the British in the Battle of Gwalior, and Tatya Topi escaped, and later he was captured and executed as well. So now we will see the causes of the failure of the War of Independence. The first cause was the lack of unity. Despite many uprisings, Indians lacked coordination and a common strategy, fighting for different causes across different regions. Some lack of unity contributed to the failure of War of Independence, and some regions like Punjab even sided with the British, weakening the overall movement. There was a lack of support, yes, because the influence of the Mughal Empire had declined, leading locals to prioritize economic and physical security. So Muslims generally opposed the British more, in more vivid way, while Sikhs and Hindus were less inclined due to their aversion to the Muslim rule. Certain Indian rulers sought to regain authority and sought British assistance, and uncontrolled vandalism during the conflict alienated the local people and reducing the support for the rebels, strengthening the British authority. Although Sikhs avoided direct involvement in the conflict, they provided substantial aid to the British. Now, if we talk about the lack of planning and aims, various groups throughout India resisted British rule for different reasons. For example, Rani of Jhansi and Nana Sahib opposed the doctrine of lapse. Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, were more inclined towards poetry than the management of warfare, lacking leadership and governance qualities. So the goals were not clear and they were different. Now, if we talk about the British strengths, they had technological edge due to Industrial Revolution. They were the dominant superpower, no doubt. And the British were determined to quash the Mughal challenge and their rule. And proficiency in diplomacy allowed the British to prevent the spread of the war throughout the India. They maintained control in many of the regions. Despite dissatisfaction with the British rule, many still viewed them as the proficient administrators. Means they thought that they were good administrators as compared to Mughals. And their approach, the British approach, included offering amnesty to insurgents, prompting many surrenders to British authorities. Now, if we talk about the effects of war, Mughal rule officially came to an end, and there were strict punishments for the royal family and the last Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar. Formal establishment of the British rule was done, and India became the British colony. Harsh penalties for rebels, especially the Muslims, because they were held main culprits. They were publicly hanged, stitched, the dead in the pigskins, and all respectable posts were denied to them. Then British changed their policy and declared that there will be no further annexation and no interference with religious beliefs. There was a gradual political awakening among Indians, and there was a rise of leadership and political parties, and the INC was also founded afterwards. So British adopted measures to win Indian confidence, and the Queen of England became the Empress of India formally. Now, the British government hierarchy was that Queen Victoria was the ultimate authority, and under her there was a Secretary of State in England with 15-man council to look over the matters of the subcontinent. Then there was a Governor General or Viceroy who was the head in India, and he was a British person who was the head of all the departments of India, and he had his own executive council who used to suggest Viceroy what to do and what not to do, but it was only suggestions, and they were nominated members in that executive councils and nominated by the Viceroy or the Secretary of the State. Then under them there was Indian Civil Services. They carried out everyday business. So it was a complete hierarchy of the British government, which was quite effective. Then if there is a very important question, that didn't India benefit from the outcomes of the War of Independence? Let's see the answer. After the War of Independence, the East India Company lost its power over India and the British government took over the country's governance. British officials like Secretary of State for India and Viceroy now governed India, implementing various changes like building railways, ending the doctrine of Lapse, and improving farming methods. There were some Indian princes kept their throne without formally joining the British Empire, while missionary schools and new universities spread across the country. However, the British also punished rebels, exiling the last Mughal emperor and reducing the power of many princes, disrupting trade and business. Muslims were unhappy with British policies like education in English, stopping cooperating, and their schools suffered when British funding was withdrawn. Many Indians never fully accepted British rule, leading to the growing doubts in Britain about their right to govern India. Now, if we talk about the reasons for the British being able to conquer India, there was two major aspects. One was Indian weaknesses. There was a disunity among various groups and no uniting force as the Mughal rule was declining. Many rulers sought British help against their rivals instead of considering British as common enemy. There was a failure of many rulers to reform their states and improve social conditions. They lived on their past history and neglected state affairs. Now, if we talk about the British strengths, because of the Industrial Revolution, they had advances in technology, superior weapons, they had better means of communication and strong confidence about their success. They had strong sense of patriotism and they acted as a uniting force with a sense of superior culture as that they wanted to spread. They had a political belief to make progress and to rule a larger part of the world, and such beliefs acted as a driving force in making successful efforts to conquer India. Now let's discuss an important question, that why Muslims were held responsible for the War of Independence. So now you can write the reasons that the British primarily blamed Muslims for the War of Independence due to key Muslim leaders like Bahadur Shah Zafar II leading the uprising from Delhi. Muslims having previously ruled India, so they desired the restoration of the Mughal Empire, leading the British to perceive that the rebellion was an attempt to regain power by the Muslims only. The British considered Muslims as an adversaries because they had removed them from the power and aiming to suppress any rebellion of Muslim rule, any reoccurrence of the Muslim rule by blaming them for the rebellion. Hindus and other communities were more willing to cooperate with the British after the war, while Muslims continue to see them as invaders, fueling British blame and straining the relations with the British. Muslims were the primary opposition to the British during the war, while other communities like Punjab and Kashmir supported the British, leading to the focus on Muslims. So additionally, Muslims also had historic resistance to British policies such as the new education system and the Persian to English language transition. So it solidified the British perception of Muslim opposition. So this was the main topic. Now there are some other important subtopics like Mangal Pandey, who was an Indian soldier who attacked on British officers on 29th March 1857, and it was the first major incident of what came to be known as the Indian Mutiny of 1857. He came into conflict with his religious beliefs. When he was posted at Barrackpur in the mid 1850s, a new rifle was introduced, and he required to bite off the end of the greased cartridge in order to load the weapon. So Mangal Pandey attempted to incite his fellow sepoys to rise up against the British officers. He attacked two officers, attempted to shoot himself after having been restrained, and eventually overpowered and arrested. And he was soon sentenced to death as well. Then there was another important subtopic which is called Vernacular Press Act of 1878. The Vernacular Press Act of 1878 aimed to control Indian language newspapers to prevent anti-British sentiments. It targeted the printing and circulation of seditious material to curb disaffection among the largely illiterate masses. So there is another subtopic called Arms Act of 1859, which was actually based on the restriction of weapon ownership among Indians, and they couldn't hold the weapons with them, reducing the potential effectiveness of any uprising against the British rule. So these were all the measures and acts which were taken by the British during the War of Independence and after the War of Independence. Hope this important topic is clear to you. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you.